The Coast Guard officer handed me the phone in a plastic bag, and my stomach just dropped. It was my brother David's. The screen was still on, frozen on the last message he ever tried to send. Something is following me from below. He sent that 3 months ago on July 15th. They found his boat, the Wanderer, adrift last Tuesday, 500 miles off the coast of Florida. But David was gone. If you've ever lost someone and been left with more questions than answers, maybe you'll understand what happened next. My name is Gloria Acosta, and David was my little brother. He was the dreamer, and I was the one who paid the bills. Our parents passed away almost a decade ago, leaving us just the small house in Jacksonville and each other. I became the parent. I worried about his credit score. He read books about sailing the world. He was all stardust and wonder, and I was all spreadsheets and anxiety. He wasn't irresponsible, not really. He was just light. He believed good things were always just over the horizon, and I was always the one pointing out the storm clouds. He bought the Wanderer 6 months ago, a 30-foot sloop, old but sturdy. He poured every dime he had, and some I didn't know he had, into fixing it up. "Glow," he'd said, his eyes brighter than I'd seen them in years. "I'm finally doing it. The big one. A solo trip to the Azores. Just me and the sea." I told him it was reckless. I told him he was crazy. Our last conversation, standing right there on the dock at the St. Augustine Marina, was a fight. A bad one. I didn't hug him goodbye. I didn't wish him well. I told him he was running away from responsibility, that he was acting like a child. He just looked at me, his face tight with a kind of disappointment that still haunts my sleep. "Just be happy for me, Glow," he said, his voice quiet. "Please, for once, just be happy that I'm happy." He untied the line, and I just stood there, my arms crossed. I watched his boat motor out of the channel until it was just a white speck. I went back to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and cried. That was July 10th, 2024. For the next 5 days, he was good about checking in. He'd send a text through his satellite messenger. "Smooth seas. Saw a pod of dolphins." And then on July 15th at 12:15 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a picture message. David standing on the bow of the Wanderer, a clear blue sky and an endless empty ocean behind him. He was holding up his phone, taking a picture of me in his mind. He was smiling. I smiled back at my screen, and for the first time, I felt that knot of anxiety loosen. He was happy. He was doing it. I texted back, "That looks beautiful. Stay safe. Love you." My message never went through. The next 3 months were a blur of silence and mounting panic. I reported him overdue. The Coast Guard searches found nothing. The experts all said the same thing. He was a solo sailor, relatively inexperienced, on a small boat in a big ocean. A rogue wave, a sudden squall, an equipment failure. He was, they said, lost at sea. I held onto that photo from 12:15 p.m. It was the last proof that he existed. Then last Tuesday I got the call. A container ship had spotted the Wanderer. Adrift, mast intact, but no one on board. The Coast Guard towed it back to port, and that's how I ended up here in 2025, standing in a stuffy Coast Guard evidence locker, staring at a phone in a plastic bag. The officer, a man named Robert, with kind, tired eyes, had already given me the official summary. "There's no sign of foul play, Ms. Acosta," he said gently. "The boat it's strange. It's perfectly fine. No damage, no water in the cabin. Frankly, it looks like he just stepped off." He led me to the boat itself, docked at their impound yard. The Wanderer looked smaller, sadder than I remembered. I stepped into the cabin, and I stopped breathing. It was exactly like the photo they'd sent me, the photo from the right-hand side of the image you've seen, his navigation station. The chart was unrolled and held down with a small compass. A half-eaten bag of crackers sat next to it. It was Normal. It was too normal. If a rogue wave had hit, wouldn't this all be thrown to the floor? Wouldn't there be damage? It's clean, I whispered. Yes, ma'am, Robert said. That's what's bothering us. The life raft is still secured, his satellite phone. Everything's here, except him. That's when he gave me the bag with the phone, a cheap old-school burner phone, not his smartphone. We found this on the table, Robert said. It's not registered to him. We only powered it on to see if we could find an owner. That's when I saw it, the message sitting in the drafts folder, not sent, just typed, to an unknown number. Time, 2024-07-15, 12:35 p.m. Something is following me from below. My blood went cold. I looked at Officer Robert. A rogue wave didn't type this. He sighed. Ma'am, below could mean anything. Below decks, a leak. Maybe he was hallucinating. Sunstroke. He was out there alone. No, I said, my voice shaking. And no, look at the time. 12:35 p.m. That's 20 minutes. 20 minutes after he sent me this. I fumbled for my own phone. I pulled up the picture David had sent me at 12:15 p.m., the one of him smiling on the bow. He sent me this, and then 20 minutes later he typed that message. Robert looked at the photo. He looks fine, Ms. Acosta. It's a beautiful day. Look behind him, I said. I zoomed in, my fingers trembling. I had looked at this photo 1,000 times. I had always seen the two little white puffs in the water behind him, one on either side. I thought it was just sea spray, a weird wave. But now, seeing it through the lens of that final text message, they weren't waves. They were too symmetrical. They were spray. The spray from something enormous breaking the surface. Two distinct trails of white water. My God, I whispered. He wasn't alone. He photographed it. He saw it. And then it took him. Robert looked at the picture, then back at me. I could see the pity in his eyes. He thought I was a grieving sister, grasping at straws. We'll log it, Guy, he said, clearing his throat. But, Gloria, you need to prepare yourself. The ocean, it doesn't always give up its secrets. We're ruling this an accident, lost at sea. I walked off that boat, my brother's last desperate words burning in my mind. The police were closing the case, but I was just opening mine. I went back to the cheap motel near the marina. I couldn't sleep. I just stared at the two images, the smiling selfie and the picture of the phone. 12:15 p.m., 12:35 p.m., 20 minutes. What happened in those 20 minutes? My brother was a dreamer, but he wasn't stupid, and he wasn't a liar. If he typed, "Something is following me from below," he meant it. The next morning I hired a lawyer, a sharp woman named Elvira. I didn't care about the boat. I didn't care about insurance. I wanted the data, all of it. The Coast Guard has been cooperative, Elvira told me a few days later, handing me a file. They're done. They've released all his effects. Here's the data dump from his satellite messenger, his laptop, and that burner phone. I went back to the motel and opened the laptop. I started with his bank accounts. I knew he'd drained his savings to buy the Wanderer, but what I found was different. 3 weeks before he set sail, there was a deposit. Not a withdrawal, a deposit. $50,000. Where did David get $50,000? The sender was a company I'd never heard of, Aegir Marine Logistics. I Googled it. The address was a P.O. box in Miami. The website was a single generic page. Global Logistics, Import, Export. It was a shell corporation. My heart was pounding. This was wrong. This was all wrong. I opened the data from the burner phone, the one with the below text. It was almost empty, barely used, except for one number saved as contact, the same number the final text was addressed to. And I looked at the GPS logs from his primary navigation system. Elvira had printed them out, a long string of coordinates marking his progress. I followed the line, east, east, and then a sharp turn south. He wasn't on the route to the Azores, not even close. On July 15th, he was hundreds of miles off course, heading directly south to a patch of empty ocean. I grabbed the high-resolution photo the Coast Guard had taken of his cabin, the one with the map. I zoomed in on the chart. It was a standard nautical chart of the North Atlantic, and there in faint pencil was a small X, a single point circled. I cross-referenced the coordinates of the X with his GPS logs. They were a perfect match. His last ping, just before his systems went dark, was right on top of that X. He wasn't lost. He wasn't sailing to the Azores. He was going to that spot. He was meeting someone. Aegir Marine Logistics, $50,000, a burner phone, a secret rendezvous, my brother, my stardust dreamer brother. What had he gotten himself into? I knew I couldn't do this alone. The police thought I was crazy. Elvira was a lawyer, not an investigator. I needed someone who understood the water, someone who understood the other side of the water. Elvira, seeing the look on my face, gave me a name. He's a consultant, she said. Retired. Used to work marine insurance, then other things. His name is Samuel. Don't tell him I sent you. I found Samuel at a rundown boatyard welding the hull of an old trawler. He was probably in his late 60s with a face like sun-baked leather and eyes that had seen too much. I'm retired, lady, he grunted, not even looking up. My brother, David Acosta, is missing. They found his boat. They're calling it an accident. Lots of accidents on the water, he said, the welding torch hissing. He had $50,000 from a shell company. He was at a rendezvous point in the middle of nowhere, and he sent this text. I held out the photo of the phone. Samuel stopped welding. He lifted his mask, and for the first time he looked at me. He looked at the phone, and his expression, it didn't change, but it hardened. He took the phone from my hand. He read the text. Something is following me from below. The police think he was hallucinating, I said. The police are stupid, he said flatly. He wiped his hands on a rag. Come inside. His office was a cramped room in the back of the boatyard, smelling of diesel, coffee, and mildew. He sat down. Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out. I told him. The fight on the dock, the $50,000, Aegir Marine, the burner phone, the X on the map, and finally I showed him the 12:15 p.m. photo, the one of David smiling with the two white shapes in the water. He stared at that photo for a long time. He zoomed in on the white shapes just as I had. What is it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Is it a whale? A creature? Samuel let out a short, harsh laugh. A creature? Yeah, you could say that, but not one from the biology books. He tapped the screen. That's not sea spray, Gloria. You were right about that. But it's not a whale either. The wake, it's too wide, too low. That is a low-profile vessel, a VLPV. What you're looking at is a narco-submersible. It's surfacing. The room tilted. What? A submarine? That's right. They run them up from Colombia. They're basically fiberglass shells full of cocaine running just below the surface to avoid radar. This rendezvous point, this X, it's a known handoff area. They surface, transfer the cargo to a clean boat, like a 30-foot sailboat, and it gets brought into Florida looking like any other tourist. I sank into a chair. Oh my God. David. Your brother wasn't just a dreamer, Samuel said, his voice softer now. He was a mule. Aegir Marine wasn't paying him to sail to the Azores. They paid him $50,000 to pick up a package. The fight on the dock, the money, his weird, desperate happiness. Just be happy for me, Glow. He wasn't chasing a dream. He thought he'd pulled off the perfect, easy crime. One trip, 50 grand, enough to really fix up the boat and what? But well, what went wrong? I asked. The text, "Something is following me." He sent that after this picture. If he was at the rendezvous, why would he? Samuel looked at the timeline. 12:15 p.m. He's there. He's cocky. He takes a selfie. The sub is surfacing behind him. He's about to make the handoff. And 12:35 p.m. 20 minutes, Samuel mused. A lot can happen in 20 minutes. The deal goes bad. How? Maybe he got spooked. Maybe he saw something he wasn't supposed to see. Or maybe... Samuel stood up and walked to a filing cabinet. He pulled out a thick binder. These subs, they don't travel alone. They're slow. They're vulnerable when they surface. They always have an escort, a go-fast boat, muscle, to make sure the mule, your brother, doesn't get any bright ideas, like, say, taking the $50,000 and the product. He tapped the text message again. Something is following me from below. He wasn't talking to you, Samuel said. He was trying to text his contact. The Edgar Marine people, he's telling them the deal is off, that he's being chased. Chased by who? The escort boat. Or, hell, maybe the sub itself. Maybe he saw them, panicked, and just ran. He hit the throttle and tried to make a break for it. So, I tried to piece it together. He's in the cabin. He's running. He hears them or sees them. He types that message. Something is following me. He means the sub or the other boat. And he never hit send, Samuel finished, because they caught him. They caught him, I repeated. My mind went back to the wanderer, the clean cabin, the bag of crackers, the map. The boat, Samuel, it was perfect. There was no fight, no blood, nothing. It was just empty. Samuel's face went dark. Yeah, that's the part that's chilling me. What do you mean? Gloria, these people, they're not loan sharks. They're not street thugs. They are cartel. They don't leave witnesses. And they don't leave evidence. If they caught him, why leave the boat? A rogue wave, I said, the official story tasting like ash in my mouth. Exactly, Samuel said. They wanted it to be a rogue wave. Think about it. If they sink the boat, what happens? It creates a debris field, an oil slick. It brings out the search and rescue. It brings out investigators, sonar, divers. They don't want that. It's messy. It draws attention to their rendezvous spot. He pointed to the photo of the cabin. But a ghost ship? A solo sailor who just vanishes? That's not a crime. That's a sad story. It's a mystery. The Coast Guard writes a report. Everyone feels bad for a week, and the case is closed. It's clean. I felt sick. So, they boarded him. They boarded him, Samuel agreed. They took him, and then they did something I've only heard about once or twice. What? They staged it. They went into his cabin. They unrolled his old chart, the one for the Azores. They put out the crackers. They left the burner phone knowing the last text would look like a crazy, panicked sailor. They set the scene. They pointed the Wanderer east, set the tiller, and just let it go. A ghost ship sailing off to nowhere, carrying the perfect, tragic, fake story. I saw it. I saw David hiding in the cabin, his hands shaking so badly he could barely type. I saw the door crash open. I saw the men. They killed him, I whispered. They took him. Samuel said, his voice heavy. He saw the sub. He saw their faces. He was the only link. They don't leave links, Gloria. I started to cry. Not the quiet, grieving tears I'd shed for months. These were hot, angry, horrified tears. Tears for my stupid, stupid brother, and tears for myself, for being the sister who yelled at him on the dock instead of the sister who listened. What do we do? I finally asked. We, Samuel said. There is no we. You go home. You grieve your brother. You accept that he was lost at sea, because the people who did this, but they don't exist. Aguirre Marine is already gone. The P.O. box is empty. The bank account is closed. There is nothing to find. No, I said. I can't. I won't. I'm taking this to the Coast Guard, to Officer Robert. He'll listen now. He'll listen, Samuel agreed. And he'll put it in a file. And that file will go to the FBI, and the FBI will put it in a bigger file. And nothing will happen, because there is no one to arrest. There is no body, and there is no evidence. Just a story. That's not enough, I said, standing up. It has to be. I took everything we had, the financial records, the GPS logs, Samuel's theory on the narco sub, the photo of the wake, and I went back to Officer Robert. I laid it all out on his desk. He didn't interrupt. He just listened. He looked at the bank transfer. He looked at the coordinates. He looked at the 12:15 p.m. photo of David, and he zoomed in on the white shapes. He was silent for a full minute. Then he picked up his phone. Yeah, he said into the receiver. Get me the Drug Interdiction Task Force. Tell them I'm reopening the Acosta case. He hung up and looked at me. The pity was gone from his eyes. It was replaced by a kind of grim respect. You were right, Ms. Acosta. This wasn't an accident. This is a homicide. That was 6 months ago. There were no arrests. Just like Samuel said, Aguirre Marine had vanished. The trail went cold almost immediately. The cartel, or whoever they were, had covered their tracks. They were ghosts. I sold the house in Jacksonville. I couldn't be there anymore. I moved to a small town on the coast. I can see the ocean from my window. I don't have justice. Not the kind you see on TV. The men who did this will never be caught. I will never be able to bury my brother. But I have the truth. I know what happened in those 20 minutes. I know my brother, my foolish, wonderful dreamer of a brother, made a terrible, terrible mistake. He got in over his head. He thought he could outsmart the ocean, and he thought he could outsmart the shadows that live beneath it. But he was wrong. I keep that photo of him on my desk, the 12:15 p.m. one, him on the bow, smiling, with the blue sky behind him. For a long time, I thought I saw terror in his eyes, a premonition, but I was wrong too. I look at it now and I see hope. He's not scared. He's happy. He's smiling. He's on his boat, on the ocean, and in that one single beautiful moment, he really believed he was going to get away with it. He believed he was free. He was wrong. But I'm so glad he had that one last moment of light before the something from below finally caught up. When you lose someone, the why can eat you alive. But what do you do when finding the why is almost as painful as the loss itself? Subscribe if you believe every truth, no matter how dark, eventually surfaces.